Clash Royale's next global tournament is starting in under a day. So here are the top 5 Clash Royale decks to run in October of 2020.
Bruh.
Hey guys, Legendaray here, and welcome back to another Clash Royale video. That's right, today I've gone ahead and compiled 5 of the most successful decks seen in both top ladder and in grand challenges, and I'm about to show you how to play each and every one of them in this video. And before we get into the video, just a couple of things to go over. I've been very busy with school this past week, so I haven't had much time to make videos. Something I'll try and work on in the future. And also, something else just arrived in the mail today. I know I haven't really officially made an on-camera announcement for 100,000 subscribers, and I just want to let you know that I appreciate every single one of you guys for all of your support. And with that out of the way, let's get into the decks. Number 1, Royal Giant Cycle. Now this meta has seen a rise in popularity of a cheaper style of Royal Giant deck, and this deck I'm sharing today is a bit of a faster Royal Giant deck. Starting off the match, I'm always going to be a little bit quicker. I have some cheap cards that I can cycle in the back, such as the Royal Ghost, the Skeletons, and the Log. However, I wouldn't advise cycling the Fisherman, the Mega Minion, or the Mother Witch in the back, as there are definitely ways that you can get very heavily punished if those cards are out of cycle. Speaking of which, it's very important at the start of the match to identify what type of matchup you are against. With this being a cycle deck, there's a little bit more variance on how you're going to play different matchups. So once my initial cycling forces out a bit of a response, I'll switch over to defense and start to build up positive elixir trades initially. First off, Mother Witch and Royal Ghost are sort of your ways to deal with swarms, and then you have the Mega Minion for any sort of high hit point damage. Skeletons serve as your distraction, and then the Fisherman kind of serves as your way to deal with the big heavy tanks. On the flip side, the offense of this deck is split into 2 main playstyles depending on the matchup. If you're against a heavier deck, well then you're going to want to be a bit more aggressive at the bridge with your pushes. May that be cycling a Royal Ghost at the bridge, or even playing the full 6 elixir Royal Giant at the bridge to apply immediate pressure onto the opponent. Against a cheaper matchup, you may want to consider cycling a Royal Giant in the back, which in double elixir may even allow you to cycle to a second Royal Giant to include in the same push. Once the Royal Giant crosses the bridge, it's also very important to know what counters they have. The easiest example is if the opponent has a heavy hitter, such as a mini P.E.K.K.A, it's important to always have the Fisherman in cycle so that the Fisherman can pull that mini P.E.K.K.A away and allow the Royal Giant to get those connections on the tower. All in all, a bit of a faster, more aggressive Royal Giant deck, but still very easy to pick up and play. Number 2, Double Spawner Spam. Now this deck has just been so notorious over the past few months, but especially these past couple of weeks, it has just shot up in popularity. Now this deck, despite the elixir cost, is a surprisingly aggressive, high pressure deck. Not in the sense that you're constantly cycling your cards at the bridge, but you're constantly going to be applying pressure with your spawner buildings. Starting off the match, I'm always, if I have a spawner in my hand, I'm gonna play the spawner down immediately. This will force your opponents in a bit of a dilemma. Do they want to make the first major commitment and respond to the spawner building, or do they want to start just taking chip damage over and over again? And trust me, the damage from those spawners really does add up very quickly. So the spawners will generally force out a response from your opponents, and then you can just react to that accordingly. And the defensive options in this department are super rock solid. For heavy hitters, you have so many options, from the Elite Barbarians to the Cannon Cart, and in terms of range and air defense, you have the Mother Witch and the Flying Machine, which I will admit are not the heaviest air hitters, so against an air deck, you're going to want to focus more on playing defense with offense. So, moving on to the offensive side of this deck, again, most of the time you're just going to be applying pressure with the spawners, but the Elite Barbarians, Cannon Cart, and Flying Machine are all still very great cards that you can even just play at the bridge as pressure. In fact, there's even a bit of spell bait here in this deck, because a lot of the times the opponents are going to want to be using their medium spells on the spawners, and that's when you can really go in with the Elite Barbarians, with the Cannon Cart, and with the Flying Machine, and the opponent simply will not have a good way to deal with them both. An additional trick is to also apply double lane pressure. By placing your spawners going down one lane and pushing with your troops down the opposite lane, this will really force your opponents in an uncomfortable position where they're gonna have to choose which lane they want to defend. Do they want to stop the bleeding of the spawners or defend the gigantic push you have down the other lane? All in all, it's a very easy, very fast-paced and aggressive deck to play, so definitely a top choice. Number 3, Royal Hogs Cycle. Now, Royal Hogs have been so popular this past month due to the buff of the Royal Hogs themselves. That being said, there has been a slight shift in which types of Royal Hog decks are popular, and in this meta, one of the most popular variations is a bit more of a tankier variation with the cannon card. Starting off the match, this is a quicker cycle deck, so ideally I'll either play a Goblin Cage in the back or cycle my Skeletons or the Log. I wouldn't recommend playing anything else, as again, there are definitely ways that you can get punished if you do so, and so again, I'm going to be playing very reactively. One additional thing that you're going to notice in this deck is a very heavy focus on Fireball bait. More specifically, the Royal Hogs, the Skeleton Dragons, the Goblin Cage, and the Mother Witch are all cards that the opponents are going to want to use their medium spells on. You're going to want to use this to your advantage to bait out the opponent's medium spell. On the defensive end, that may mean first playing a Mother Witch, forcing the opponent to fireball her out, and then going in with your Skeleton Dragons. Or on offense, this may mean baiting out the fireball before going in with your Royal Hogs. But the fact that the cards in this deck actually aren't that tanky is actually something that you can play to your advantage. Breaking down the defense, the core of this deck revolves around two defensive cards, the Cannon Cart and the Goblin Cage. These are going to be your two main ways of dealing with big tanks such as the Giants and the Golems of the world, and especially if there is a building targeting tank, make sure you always save the Goblin Cage so that you can pull that tank away. Mother Witch and Skeleton Dragons will both die to medium spells like the Fireball, so again, just make sure you're spacing those units out so you don't actually give your opponents the Fireball value that they want. On the offensive end, this deck is a very chip style deck. With the Royal Hogs almost instant attack time, as soon as the Royal Hogs reach the tower, they'll get a little bit of damage each and every time, which is why it works so well in a cycle deck. The more Royal Hogs you cycle, the more almost guaranteed damage you're going to be able to get, which is really just what makes this deck so deadly. In addition, there's also a lot of opportunities for you to apply double lane pressure. First off, you can not only split the Royal Hogs in the middle, but you can also split the Skeleton Dragons as well. But you can even just play the Royal Hogs down one lane and then play something like a Cannon Cart in the other to apply double lane pressure as well. Ram Rider Bridge Spam. This is the classic Ram Rider Bridge Spam deck. Due to the aggressive nature of a lot of decks in this meta, it's been very important for players to use decks that can sort of deal or even counteract that aggressiveness. And this Bridge Spam deck does exactly that. I'm starting off the match always cycling some sort of card, may that be a Bar Barrel, a Bandit, or a Royal Ghost at the bridge. This usually forces out a response from the opponent, or else they're gonna take a ton of damage, and honestly that just makes your job even easier, because then you can just simply play reactively to what your opponents are using. Now the premise of this deck is very simple. It's a Bridge Spam deck, so the goal is to be constantly applying pressure to prevent your opponents from being able to build up their own pushes. Again, this comes in the form of quick, cheap pushes, such as a Lone Bandit or a Royal Ghost cycled at the bridge, but there are also opportunities to build up bigger pushes with the Ram Rider, mainly if you have surviving units after a successful defense. The one thing about the Ram Rider is that she's actually not that good when she's sent in alone. You're generally going to want to be able to support her somehow with some of your other units, which will make her just that much more deadly. Lastly, the Magic Archer can be one of your most powerful weapons. If you know how to use the geometry properly, you can just get so much value onto your opponent's tower. On the defensive end, this deck is also very solid. And what makes it so solid is actually the Ram Rider, because her snare ability is so effective at completely stalling an opponent's push, which will buy some very valuable time for your other defensive units. For example, Inferno Dragon and Lumberjack are there to take care of tanks, Royal Ghost and Magic Archer are there to take care of splash troops, and the Bandit is very useful with her dash ability. The troops that you use on defense will then very seamlessly transition into a successful offense, and that versatility in the way that you can build different pushes is really what makes this deck so deadly. Again, the goal is to maintain a quick, high pressure all throughout the match, but never be afraid to use some of your offensive cards on the defensive side as well. Number 5, Lava Hound Control. Now, I can't end a top 5 decks list without listing a Lava Hound deck. So here we are, okay? I put it in the number 5 spot. This is the Lava Hound deck to play in this current meta. It doesn't have the balloon, but it's still a very aggressive beatdown style deck. Starting off the match, I'm either going to be going Lava Hound first play because that's just how the game is at this current moment, or I'm just going to be simply reacting to what my opponent plays. One or the other. There's really no in between. But starting off going over the offense of this deck, well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, right? It's a classic beatdown push. It's very, very simple. You go in with the big Lava Hound in front, and then you got the Flying Machine, the Mega Minion, and the Skeleton Dragons that go behind. Miner will be sent to take out any sort of ground counters the opponent might have, as well as a tank for the Lava Pups once the Lava Hound dies. One thing to always watch out for is to never give too much spell value. I always say this, but it's the biggest reason why Lava Hound players will lose a match. On the defensive end, well, being a Lava Hound deck, another big weakness is that you won't have as many ground answers. However, you still do have a good amount of options, most notably in the Goblin Cage to pull any sort of building targeting units, as well as the guards, and the Miner can be used as a defensive troop as well. Once you have the opponent's ground troops distracted, well, then you can begin using your air units to defend as well. Mega Minion and Skeleton Dragons both do an insane amount of damage, and Flying Machine is good at sniping units away from afar. One nice trick is to utilize the Fireball bait between the Flying Machine and the Skeleton Dragons. I'll generally play the Flying Machine first to bait out the Fireball, and as soon as that medium spell is out of cycle, I'll use the Skeleton Dragons to get as much value as possible. All in all, a very high risk, high reward deck to play. Definitely more on the aggressive side, so that's just something that you should be keeping in mind when you play this deck. So there we go, the top 5 decks to run in October. Hope you guys find a deck that you guys would like to use. Best of luck in the upcoming global tournament, and I'll see you guys next time.